This is 7 and 1. This is episode 7 and 1. I'm not sure for some reasons. Eventually, of course. I have no idea. Eventually, but you could assume. Definitely. Eventually. I know, right? So, if I could assume, usually. Because I didn't know this. So, if I could assume, right? Eventually, but I didn't know this. Definitely. If I could assume, usually. Because I didn't know this. Because if I assume, right? Eventually. Because I didn't know this. I know, right? So, if I assume, usually. Because I didn't know this. If I assume, right? Of course. Because I didn't know this. If I assume, eventually. If I assume, eventually. I know, right? If I assume, eventually. Of course. Because I didn't know this. If I assume, eventually. Of course. I have no idea, but you could assume, eventually. But you know this, definitely. It just has a good point, eventually. If I assume, eventually. If you assume, eventually. But I didn't know this. If I assume, eventually. Because I didn't know this. If you assume, eventually. Of course. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. Yep. If I assume, eventually. Of course. Because I did know this. If I assume, eventually. But I didn't know this. If I assume, eventually. No way. So if I assume, eventually. If I assume, eventually. But I didn't know this. Because if I assume, eventually. If I assume, eventually. If I didn't know this. If I assume, eventually. I know, right? So if I assume, eventually. Of course. I have no idea.
So you have no idea, right?
Well, if you assume.
Yep.
Okay.
So, you didn't notice?
Nope.
Why, so you assume?
Yep.
Right. So, you didn't notice?
Nope.
Oh. Okay. So, you assume?
Yes.
Okay. So, you didn't notice?
Nope.
Of course.
If you assume, usually.
Yep.
Of course.
I know, right? If I assume, usually.
I know. So, if you consume,
Yep, but I didn't notice. Definitely. If I consume, eventually. But I did notice. So, if you consume?
yep.
Oh, okay. So, you consume eventually?
Yep.
Right. Well, if you consume?
Yep.
Right. Well, if you consume eventually?
I know, right? So, if you consume,
Yep, cause I did notice. Eventually.
of course.
You have no idea, right?
Well, if you consume visually,
Yep. If I assume it might be visually, but I didn't notice. But you consume visually?
of course.
I know, right? If I consume visually, but I didn't notice. So, you consume?
Yep.
Okay. So, did I spoon before?
Nope.
Okay. So, how do you know this?
I don't know. But you consume visually.
I know, right? If I consume visually.
Of course.
I know. For some reasons, if I consume.
Yep.
Okay.
So, if you consume visually,
Yep. Because I didn't notice, but you consume. Eventually.
of course.
Yep. If I consume visually, but I didn't notice. So if you consume,
Yep.
Freya. Did I realize that visually?
Of course.
I know, right? So if you consume,
Yep.
Freya. Did I realize that?
Of course.
I know, right? If you consume visually,
I know.
so if you consume,
Yep.
right? Did I realize that?
Of course.
You have no idea.
I know, right?
Well, if you consume visually,
Yep.
Freya. Did I realize that visually?
Of course.
You have no idea. For some reasons, visually.
Of course.
I know, right? If you consume visually,
Yep.
Freya. So, if you consume,
Yep.
right. So, if you consume visually,
Yep.
right. So, you didn't notice?
Nope.
Freya. Did I realize that visually?
Of course.
You have no idea, right?
Well, if you consume,
Yep.
okay.
So, you didn't notice?
Nope.
Freya. So, if you consume visually,
Of course.
I know, right?
So, if you consume,
Yep, if I consume visually,
of course.
I know. So, you consume?
Yep.
Okay. You have no idea, right?
Well, if you consume usually,
Of course. Just let me know, okay? Because I didn't know this. If you consume.
yep.